What is an animal fact that absolutely blew your mind? Story 1. Sometimes an octopus mimics an inanimate object, such as a rock or plant, while moving so slowly that one would swear it is not moving at all. It does so when it needs to cross an open space, an activity that exposes it to detection. Imitating a plant, the octopus waves some of its arms above itself, making them look like branches, while tiptoeing on 3 or 4 of its remaining arms. It takes tiny little steps in line with the water movement. If the ocean is wild, plants sway back and forth, which helps the octopus disguise its steps by swaying in the same rhythm. On a waveless day, on the other hand, nothing else moves, so the octopus needs to be extremely careful. It may take 20 minutes to cross a stretch of seafloor that it otherwise might have crossed in 20 seconds. The animal acts as if rooted to the spot, counting on the fact that no predator will take the time to notice that it is actually inching forward. Story 2. Jumping spiders have basically the same vision we do. They can see us and know when we're looking at them and like to show off. I would assume this is the same for most spiders that actively hunt their prey. I'm in Australia and we get huntsmen here. They're big and creepy looking, but ultimately harmless. They don't build webs, they're wicked fast and chase down their food, including speedy bugs like roaches. Anyway, when they get in your house, they usually hang out high on a wall where it meets the ceiling. And in my experience, if you look at them too long and start to move toward them, they just book it at warp speed. I've always wondered how well they, and spiders in general, can see, but spiders and especially their eyes creep me out. So I've never really researched it. Story 3. Argentine tigers are known to be the only warm-blooded reptiles. Unlike all other reptiles that require a heat source to maintain a warm body temperature, these tigers are able to turn on an internal heater certain times of the year, mainly observed around breeding season. Both males and females can do this. Most of the time, they still require an external heat source, but the fact they can warm themselves up when needed is a first for reptiles. Story 4. Naked mole rats have a similar social structure to bees. They even have a queen, who is the only one in this structure who can bear children. This queen is genetically identical to other females, so scientists are not quite sure why she is the only fertile one. As soon as the queen dies, all other females become fertile until the first pregnant one gets to be the new queen. One compelling theory on how this works is that the queen puts so much psychological stress on other females that they become infertile. Story 5. When the Stegosaurus was discovered, paleontologists thought that its brain was probably somewhere on his back, and maybe he even had multiple brains. They thought that its head was too small for a brain, but the Patrick Star of the dinosaurs proved them wrong. But hey, it's paleontology. They'd probably find out he spat fire and could fly in some years. Another funny dinosaur story would be the Brontosaurus. After some years, they found out that the original bones belonged to another species, so the Brontosaurus never actually existed until they found another fossil later that put the good old sauropod back on the family tree. Reminds me of that meme of the bird that re-evolved himself into existence. Story 6. Cats can track prey using their whiskers to sense small variations in air pressure. They are so sensitive, they can literally use them as a motion tracker. Most people also don't realize cats have fairly poor close-up vision. They struggle to see anything closer than 5 inches clearly, as any cat owner who spends a good portion of their life pointing out small treats in front of their cat can attest. Their other senses more than make up for it, however. Story 7. Not really mind-blowing, but interesting nonetheless. Sheep and cows that have color variations within the breed self-segregate by color even when there is no rational reason for it. All the white sheep will hang out in a group, leaving a few black sheep on their own. Red cows, brown cows are known as red, will hang out with other red cows, white with white, etc. Source. I live on a farm, and the area in which it is based is rural, fairly easy to see. Story 8. Dogs are colorblind, most mammals are, with a small section of primates as the exception. And we're lucky enough to be in that little group. According to David Attenborough, early mammals were nocturnal hunters that needed sensitive night vision and traded their color vision for night vision. Millennia later, one primate species re-evolved color vision to cash in on the fruit color changes that were occurring as symbioses between plants and birds or insects, etc. And that primate was our ancient ancestor. Story 9 betta fishes can recognize their names. I have no idea if that's 100% true, but according to Google, they can feel the vibrations in water. Overall, the realization that animals are far more intelligent and emotional than my family's religion painted them to be was mind-blowing. My whole childhood, I thought that only dogs can recognize their names, and birds and fishes are basically decoration until I got my own animals. I thought that animals can only love, be sad, happy, scared, and angry. I had no idea that they could be depressed, jealous, feel grief, or missing someone. I've never known that they can learn to open doors or have any creative thoughts. I thought only dogs are able to do those things. Monkeys have their own primitive religions. Story 10. They used to exist, and if our atmosphere was more oxygen rich, we'd once again have dragonflies the size of hawks. During the Carboniferous period, giant dragonflies and cockroaches used to roam around. The leading theory is because of the way they breathe, the breathing system of more modern bugs has to be much larger in proportion to their bodies in order to get sufficient oxygen to their cells. They can't afford to cultivate as much other bodily mass, whereas the older bugs had a nearly 50% higher concentration of oxygen than is present in today's atmosphere, meaning their breathing systems could be smaller, and they were able to cultivate more and more mass. Story 11. One theory as to why large animals like blue whales are highly resistant to cancer due to them being so huge. Because whales have so much body mass to work with, any tumors they develop stick around longer than they would on smaller animals like humans. As the tumor grows, its cancer cells keep multiplying and mutating until eventually some of those cells become so different from the original tumor it starts to become a tumor within a tumor, or a hypertumor. This can happen more than once and end up killing or at least weakening the tumor. Story 12. When a hedgehog encounters a new smell, it will bite and lick the source of the smell to form a white foam in its mouth with the smell, and then proceeds to smear it on its quills. This behavior is called self-anointing. No one is really sure why they do it, though. Some people say that it's to make their quills more irritating to the touch, and others say it's to hide their own smell. Story 13. Goldfish should not be kept in little bowls. They produce a huge amount of waste for their size, and so they need a very powerful filtration system. Pet shop workers will tell you they grow to fit the size of their tank. This is not true. If the tank isn't big enough for them, they die young. With enough space and decent filtration, a goldfish can live for decades. All the rubbish you hear in some pet shops is just because they know they'll sell a lot less fish if you actually knew what it takes to look after them. To add to this, betta fish don't belong in bowls either. There's a horrible misconception that they get stressed out by large tanks, but they only get stressed when they're super exposed. They are more than happy with the large tank, so long as there's plenty of hiding spaces and plants. Also, they do not live in puddles in the wild. They are native to Vietnam, where they live in very, very long, shallow rice paddies. Speaking of their native habitat, they come from warm waters, so they need a tank that is around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Bettas need 5-gallon tanks, heated and filtered. Story 14. The fingerprints of a koala are so indistinguishable from humans that they have on occasion been confused at a crime scene, waiting for an evil koala as a Disney movie villain. Also, if anyone from Disney is reading this and goes ahead with this, I will take 5% of total sales as commission. Thanks. This is actually the basis for the script I wrote last year. It's about a team of elite FBI agents engaged in a manhunt for a high society art thief. But she uses a trained koala to steal the priceless art and confuse investigators with a multitude of koala fingerprints left at each crime scene. The twist comes when it's revealed that the thief and the koala are identical twins and have the same fingerprints. I call it Collar That Koala, starring the Baldwin brothers as the FBI agents, Juliette Lewis as the thief, and Wiley Wiggins as the koala, directed by Michael Bay. Long story short, I shopped it around Hollywood for a while and did blow in a Shoney's bathroom stall with Calvin Bacon, Kevin Bacon's acupuncturist's reflexologist's husband, but it never really picked up any traction. Probably just bad timing since all the big studios are focusing on Bollywood remakes, and nobody is looking for a heist/caper movie right now. Story 15. Okapis are rare and reclusive in the wild, so for a long time, were thought to be mythical creatures like unicorns or dragons because they were almost never seen. They appear frequently in the logos of old mythical creature organizations. Snakes don't hear, but feel vibration instead. If trying to warn a snake of your presence, you should stomp your feet instead of speaking like you would around a mammal in the wild. Snakes also don't have eyelids like we do, so it can be very hard to tell if they are asleep. It is better to interact with a snake using a strike guard, even with friendly pet snakes, to avoid startling a sleeping snake and getting bit. Story 16. Frogs breathe through their skin. They also don't have working throats. They use their eye muscles to force things down into their stomach. They also eat their own shed by slowly pushing it from the back and into their mouths. If you see a frog yawning, it's likely eating its dead skin. Mantids do. In fact, eat the head of the male mates, but only to ensure that the female has adequate nutrition through her pregnancy. Story 17. Baby blue whales grow insanely quickly, approximately 200 pounds per day on average, during their first year of life. That's about a pound every 8 minutes, which means that if someone put a baby blue whale in front of you with a knife and fork, you quite literally couldn't eat it faster than it was growing. Bonus fact, it does so as a result of the insanely fatty milk that blue whale mothers produce. It's so fatty, in fact, that it has the consistency of toothpaste or cottage cheese in water and floats in big, ghostly clumps before it's slurped up. After all, if it wasn't so thick, it would just dilute and be lost. Blue whales also don't have external nipples and instead have a flap through which the milk is extruded. Story 18. Cats are obligate carnivores and come from the desert originally. This means a few things. Cats really should only eat a high meat and high moisture diet. We give them kibble for convenience, but really all the carbs in kibble and the low moisture contribute to chronic dehydration and eventual kidney disease, urinary problems in most cats. Some have excellent DNA and will live through a lot. Much like that one person you know that drank and ate like crap their whole life but lived till 93. High meat and moisture in their diet changes the skin and coat, makes it less dry and dandruffy and more lustrous. It changes their activity level, makes them more active, and it changes their health overall, adds longevity, improves their immune system health. A kibble diet will cause kidney stones, bladder stones, dandruff, dry skin, make them more fatigued, and eventually they will most likely die of kidney disease or urinary tract issues. Cancer also feeds on glucose, so as a kibble diet is high in unnecessary carbs, they break down into simple sugars and feed cancers. Meat protein does not do this. Having cats and learning this stuff really changed my and my cats' lives for the better. They are 16 and thriving and not just making it through day to day. Story 19. Horses' digestive systems are sensitive. Any horse can die from eating grass clippings or too many apples. And some horses also have food allergy, bad teeth, or other health problems that make certain treats bad for them. In short, don't feed the horsey if you don't ask its owner first. My friend's horse literally died because some idiot came in and gave it a whole pile of apples. And my neighbor's horses were tough little things, but they all had constant diarrhea because little kids, encouraged by their moms, came by every day to feed them all kinds of junk, in spite of like 6 signs saying, do not feed the horses. If a liberty, circus, etc. Trainer uses a whip, that doesn't mean they are hurting the horse. The whip is an extension of the trainer's arm, so the trainer can give signals to parts of the horse's body that they can't reach. If you see a horse doing tricks and the trainer does not have a whip, I guarantee that one was used at some point in the training process. Obviously, it's possible to misuse the whip, but don't assume that abuse is happening just because you see one. This has to be my biggest pet peeve in internet comment threads about circus horses and liberty performance. In wild horse herds, the stallion is not the leader. Of course, there are all stallion herds, in which one stallion will more or less lead, but that's another matter. The stallion walks in the back of the herd to protect it from threats and make sure no youngins run off. The leader, who knows where to go, is the most knowledgeable and dominant mare. Multiple mares can hold this position at the same time, switching off based on who has more experience in certain situations. Mares are super aggressive with uppity stallions. I've seen this in real life. It's a bona fide matriarchy out there. Story 20 rats. Rats are really, really smart. They can learn to use tools, are one of the few animals to show empathy, and can teach themselves beneficial behaviors. One example was one of our pets, Clarence. We adopted him at around 6 weeks old and never taught him this. But if he was riding around on your shoulder and wanted to go to a specific place, like the couch or the kitchen counter, he would go to the shoulder that was closest to his destination and tug on your sleeve with his teeth until you lifted your arm and made him a bridge. He also used to be able to open the other cages in our rat room to let the girls out. He was an amazing little fella. They all are. Story 21. A rabbit's favorite food is not carrots. In fact, the only part of a carrot most rabbits would be interested in would be the green sprig out of the top that you never actually see in stores. If you try to just feed your bunny carrots, it won't survive. The idea that rabbits love carrots comes entirely from Bugs Bunny, constantly snacking on one. Why do bugs always have a carrot? It was originally a parody of a scene from the 1934 movie, It Happened. The movie is mostly forgotten these days, other than by film buffs, but won Best Picture back in the day and was extremely well known in its time. There's a famous scene where Clark Gable is gnawing on a carrot while being snarky. So they had 1930s bugs gnaw on a carrot and snark. Audiences at the time would have instantly recognized it just as easily as anyone around in the early 2000s. Recognized all those slow-mo kung fu comedy sequences as Matrix parodies. Bug's carrot became his trademark, and the origin has been forgotten. So now everyone thinks rabbits love carrots. Bonus rabbit fact: if you live in the woods and eat nothing but rabbit, you'll die. Rabbit meat does not contain all of the necessary nutrients to sustain a human. So if you only eat rabbit, you'll eventually starve to death, no matter how much you eat. Bonus: it happened one night. Fact: the old joke about showing some leg while hitchhiking to get a car to stop also originates from It Happened One Night. Story 22. Some animals can regenerate parts of their body. Sharks can regrow their teeth. Imagine the thousands of dollars some of us wasted on teeth, and how easy it was when we were kids to just grow a pair of teeth. Yes, I would definitely prefer to save a few thousands of dollars and have healthy teeth. Or how human babies can regrow entire fingers if they are a few months old. Would change the lives of amputees, and don't tell me how the human body can't do it. It doesn't want to. It's a scumbag. The same way a human body could regrow any organs it wanted to. Not sure about the brain. But that would make such a huge difference to people. Our DNA is crap. It doesn't really want humans to survive as individuals. Story 23. Buzzards are not vultures. Buzzards are birds in the genus Buteo, like the red-tailed hawk you often see perched on the freeway lights or electric poles. And even though they're called hawks, the true hawks are in the genus Accipiter, such as the goshawk and coopers. If I remember correctly, the buzzard thing happened because the first settlers thought a vulture looked similar to their buzzard back home and started calling it that before the taxonomists got there. And then the name just stuck for vultures. So if you see a red tail, feel free to call it a buzzard or a hawk. Just don't call vultures buzzards. Story 24. Horses absolutely do lay down to sleep and will often nap during the day. I assure you they are more than likely not sick or dead, especially if there is more than one laying down. Yes, it is kind of you to notify the person who is living there, as these creatures are hell-bent on self-destruction, and colic can happen anytime to any horse. And with colic, time does matter. But maybe stop and see if you can get the animal's attention without trespassing. Often just whistling and making loud noises will at least get them to move their ears. I've had several people knock on my door over the years to tell me I have a horse down in my south pasture. I go check, and sure enough, one or more of my herd of fatties is laying out, sunning him or herself, and snoring away. I wake them and tell them to get their lazy butt up because they're scaring people. Story 25. Here are some small bits of advice from someone who works in the cat room of an animal shelter. Next time you go to a shelter and want to pet some kitties, perhaps these tidbits will help you have a better experience. You can very easily avoid being bitten or scratched by a cat if you simply approach slowly and from the front. By slowly, I mean quite slowly. It can take like 5 minutes to get a cat to allow you to touch it even a little bit. Always start by petting their head and be very cautious when petting an unfamiliar cat's body. They hate it for whatever reason. I've known so many cats who are total cuddle monsters until you try to pet their shoulders or back. Stick to the top of the head, the chin, and behind the ears. Also, this should really go without saying, but never ever startle an unfamiliar cat. You will be screwed. If a cat is sleeping, feel free to wake it up. If it's too sleepy to be bothered, it will ignore you or walk away. But if you're going to wake it up, put a hand in front of its face and make soft noises. If it still doesn't wake up, slowly increase the volume. Don't be afraid to talk to cats. In my experience, a soothing, constant tone actually calms them a lot. Make sure it's soft and sweet. Story 26. I'm going to list a bunch of pet bird ones because there's an unbelievable amount of birds with trauma and emotional issues out there, as well as just plain ignorance. If a pet bird bites you, you really cannot get back at it. Flicking it, yelling, hitting it are not only ineffective, but can stress the bird out further, or even help the bird dislike you. Instead, leave the bird alone. Stop interacting with it for a few minutes. The most important thing to remember is that birds are birds. You can't expect them to act like other animals. Birds need to eat lots of fresh vegetables and fruits. However, many birds are afraid of new foods, but still want to do whatever you're doing. They always want to eat the food that's on your plate, no matter what it is. I found that taking a bite out of something and then offering them a bite usually works. If your bird is having a problem with yelling, then yelling back at them to shut up is not helping. The best thing you can do is ignore their screaming and make sure they get enough interaction every day. Stop a bird from bleeding with cornstarch. If there's no cornstarch, then flour. Clipping a bird's wings properly will not hurt them. Most importantly, buying a bird for show is never a good idea. There are so many people who buy scarlet macaws, hyacinths, yeah, Amazons, and cockatoos because they are pretty and exotic, and then just leave them in their cage. Never buy a bird simply because they are cute, pretty, or more unique than other pets. Let me tell you, people who do this are selfish and almost never do their research. A bird is a creature prone to emotions just like you and me. They can get depressed, lonely, and pluck their feathers if they are neglected or do not receive enough interaction. It's really not worth destroying a beautiful creature's life in order to satisfy your materialistic needs. You get a bird because you love a bird,